Winterfell had always been cold, but that day a strange chill ran deeper than snow. Jon Snow stood by the training yard, wiping sweat from his brow after a long sparring session with the younger boys. He had no plans for the evening, but everything changed when a raven arrived, its black wings cutting across the northern sky like a shadow from the past. The message was short, sealed with the royal stamp, but it didn't come from King Robert. It came from a secret hand. "The king is being poisoned. Beware the queen. Trust only your blood." Jon read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't signed, but he recognized the script. Maester Luwin confirmed it too. It was written by Arya Stark. She was never one for letters, so if she had sent one, it had to be serious. Jon didn't waste time. He went straight to Robb, who had been taking over more and more responsibility from their father since Ned's death. Robb looked up from his war maps and frowned as Jon handed him the scroll. "Arya?" he said. "How would she even know this?" Jon replied, "She's in King's Landing. She knows more than we do." Robb read the letter 3 times, same as Jon did. His face slowly turned red with anger. "Cersei," he muttered. "If she's trying to kill the king—" Jon interrupted. "Then we might be the only ones who can stop it." They both knew how dangerous it was. Cersei Lannister didn't just use poison and whispers. She had the King's Guard, spies in every corner, and even her own brother, Jaime, one of the most feared swordsmen in the realm. But they also knew this King Robert might be many things: drunk, loud, careless. But he was once a brother to Ned, a friend to their family. And if Arya risked everything to send this message, they had to act. Robb made a decision that night. "We ride to King's Landing, quietly. No banners, no army, just a few good men." Jon nodded. "And Ghost," Robb smiled faintly. "And Grey Wind." Within 2 days, they rode out with 10 trusted Stark men. No one else in Winterfell knew the real reason, not even Catelyn. They told her it was a diplomatic mission to speak with the king about peace in the realm. That much was true, but not the whole truth. The journey to King's Landing was long and cold. They avoided the main roads, riding through forests and hills, stopping only when they had to. They didn't want to be seen. Cersei's spies could be anywhere, but Jon kept thinking, why now? Why would Arya say the king is being poisoned? Then he remembered. Last they heard, Robert had gone hunting. Too perfect. Jon looked over at Robb one night by the campfire. "You think it's already happened?" Robb shook his head. "If Arya sent that letter, there's still time." By the time they reached the capital, it was night. King's Landing smelled like sweat, dirt, and secrets. They found a small inn near Flea Bottom, hidden among the shadows. Jon covered Ghost with a cloak. People feared direwolves, and they didn't want attention. That same night, a young boy slipped into their room, a dirty-faced child with brown eyes that seemed too sharp for his age. He handed Robb a note and vanished before they could ask who sent him. The note was from Arya. "The Queen plans to poison the king during his return feast. He returns tomorrow. Trust no one but Lord Varys. I'm hiding in the catacombs." Robb clenched his fists. "That's it. We stop this tomorrow." Jon looked at him. "How? We can't just walk into the Red Keep." Robb grinned, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "No, but we can find a way in. And when we do, we find Robert before Cersei does." The game had changed. 2 sons of the North had come to the Lion's Den, and they weren't leaving without making history. The sun hadn't yet risen when Robb and Jon set out from the inn. The streets of King's Landing were still, but never truly silent. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried. Rats scattered through alleys. The city never slept, it only hid its sins better at night. They moved fast, cloaked in plain black, their faces shadowed by hoods. Ghost and grey wind padded silently behind them, their presence giving comfort even in the heart of enemy territory. Every sound made Jon's hand twitch toward his sword. He didn't trust this city, neither did Robb. Their first stop was the only man Arya said they could trust, Lord Varys. Finding him wasn't easy, but Varys had a way of finding them. They were barely halfway to the Red Keep's outer gates when a cloaked figure stepped into their path. Thin, quiet, and calm, the man said in a soft voice, "The wolves come to the lion's den. How poetic." Jon drew his sword without thinking. Ghost snarled. Robb held up his hand. "Are you Varys?" The man gave a short, mocking bow. "At your service, Lord Stark. Or perhaps I should say, Princes of the North. You have come to stop a murder that hasn't happened yet. How noble. How utterly foolish." Robb stepped forward, eyes sharp. "Is it true? About the Queen?" Varys sighed. "True enough. Her plan was simple, a goblet of wine laced with venom, a feast to welcome the king home from his hunt, his final feast. Her son would be king before sunrise." Jon said quietly, "So, Arya was right." "She often is," Varys replied, raising an eyebrow. "She's been sneaking around the Red Keep like a ghost, braver than most knights I know." Robb was done talking. "Can you get us into the Red Keep?" Varys gave him a thin smile. "I can. But once inside, you're on your own. If the Queen finds out you're here, you'll be branded traitors, murderers even. She controls the stories in this city." Jon stepped beside Robb. "We'll take our chances." With a nod, Varys led them through narrow alleys and winding tunnels. Beneath the city, the air was damp and foul, and the stone walls were covered in mold. Rats fled their path. Varys walked like he had done it 1,000 times before. "These tunnels were built by Maegor the Cruel," Varys whispered. "To escape, to spy, to kill unseen, a king's best tool, or worst fear." Finally, they reached a small iron door. Varys turned to them. "This will take you beneath the Tower of the Hand. From there, it's a straight path up to the Great Hall. The feast begins at sunset. If you want to save him, you must reach the king before the wine does." Jon nodded. "What about Arya?" "She's safe," Varys said. "For now, but if the Queen catches her, she'll suffer, as will you both. Be swift, boys, and beware the lion in gold armor." With that, he vanished into the shadows. Robb pushed open the door. The corridor beyond was dark and cold, but they stepped through without hesitation. The dire wolves followed, silent and watchful. Inside the Red Keep, everything smelled like stone and secrets. They moved quickly, avoiding patrols, hiding in alcoves, pausing when footsteps echoed too close. Jon's heart pounded every time a Lannister guard passed. At last, they reached a narrow staircase that led up toward the main hall. Voices drifted down, laughter, music, the clatter of plates. The feast had begun. Robb turned to Jon. "This is it. Once we step into that hall, everything changes." Jon drew his sword. "Then let's change it." They kicked open the side door, just as a servant carried in a golden goblet on a tray. At the high table, King Robert was already flushed from wine, but not yet drunk. Cersei sat beside him, smiling sweetly, eyes locked on the goblet like a cat waiting for the kill. "Stop!" Robb shouted, his voice like thunder through the hall. Gasps filled the room. All eyes turned. Guards reached for swords. Robert blinked, stunned, as two cloaked young men stormed into his feast, wolves snarling at their heels. "Who dares?" the king began. But Jon stepped forward, holding out the goblet he'd snatched from the tray. "There's poison in this wine, your grace. Someone is trying to kill you." Silence. Then Chaos. Cersei stood, her face pale. "How dare you accuse?" "Enough!" Robert roared, his voice shaking the walls. He looked down at Jon, then Robb. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Stark boys. Ned's blood." He turned to the goblet, sniffed it once. His face darkened. "I'll be damned." Guards froze, unsure who to obey. And the Queen? She didn't wait. She ran. But Robb was faster. Robb leapt over the banquet table with grey wind at his heels, plates crashing and goblets flying. Cersei's golden gown whipped around a corner as she fled down the side corridor, but Robb was right behind her. For all her royal grace, fear made her clumsy. She stumbled once just enough. He caught her at the base of a narrow stairwell, grabbing her arm roughly. "You tried to kill your king," Robb hissed. Cersei spat in his face, snarling like the lion she claimed to be. "He was a drunk, a fool. The realm deserves better than Robert Baratheon. My son is the future." "Your son is a bastard," Robb snapped back. "Born of incest, if what Arya says is true. You sit in your tower, playing gods with people's lives." She slapped him, hard, but Robb didn't move. He only tightened his grip until she winced. Back in the great hall, Jon stood between Robert and the stunned guests. Ghosts circled the edges of the hall, growling low. All around them, tension built like a storm about to break. Jaime Lannister, still seated at the king's right hand, hadn't moved yet, but Jon could see the fury in his golden eyes. "Put that cup down, your grace," Jon said firmly, holding up the goblet again. "Let someone else taste it. Anyone." Robert snorted, eyes darting between Jon and the cup. "Boy, I drink poison every day, liars, flatterers, backstabbers. What makes this different?" Jon stepped forward. "Because it came from your queen. Ask your food taster if he's still alive." Robert narrowed his eyes, but just then one of the servants cried out, "My lord, the other servant, the girl who carried the goblet, she's missing." Varys stepped forward from the shadows. No one had noticed him until now. "Gone, your grace," as if she vanished into smoke. "My little birds say she was seen entering the Queen's chambers days ago. Not a true servant at all." Robert stood, slowly. A deep growl rumbled from his chest. "Cersei!" Jaime finally rose. His hand rested on the pommel of his sword. "Careful, Snow," he said softly. "Accusing a queen is treason." Jon met his eyes. "So is killing a king." For a moment it seemed the hall would erupt into violence, swords half drawn, men glancing toward their lords, waiting for orders. Then heavy footsteps echoed as Robb re-entered, dragging Cersei by the arm. Her gown was torn, her hair wild, but her eyes still burned with pride and hate. "Let me go," she shouted. "You have no right." Robert turned toward her, and for once the look in his eyes wasn't drunk or distracted. It was kingly, cold, sharp. "You tried to poison me." Cersei didn't deny it. She raised her chin. "Yes, I did, because you're a fat, useless drunk who lost this kingdom the moment you won it. You love whores and wine more than your people. You're not a king, you're a bloated shadow of one." Robert was silent. Then, without a word, he raised his hand. The guards hesitated. Jaime stepped forward. "She's still the queen." Robert looked at him, then said in a voice low and full of venom, "She was." He turned to his men. "Take her, lock her in the black cells. Anyone who interferes joins her." Jaime stared at him. "You bastard." Robert didn't even flinch. "That boy just saved my life. You've been guarding my death." As the queen was dragged away, screaming curses, the room fell into a thick, heavy silence. No one cheered. No one moved. The truth had shattered too many illusions. Jon stood beside Robb. Both were breathing hard, hearts pounding. "Is it done?" Jon whispered. Robb looked at the bloodless goblet still clutched in Jon's hand. Not yet. Robert sat back down, shoulders sagging under the weight of betrayal and survival. He looked up at the Stark boys, his old friend's sons. For a moment, something almost human flickered in his tired eyes. "You two saved my life," he said hoarsely. "That makes you heroes in some eyes, and enemies in others." "We didn't do it for glory," Jon said quietly. Robert nodded. "Then you're more like your father than I ever was." The king stood. "Send ravens, summon the council. The queen has tried to murder the king. This changes everything. The Lannisters will answer for this." But as the servants scurried and the guests whispered, Robb leaned close to Jon and whispered, "This is just the beginning." And deep in the Red Keep, in dark corners no one noticed, someone else had been watching, and now the real game was beginning. The next morning in King's Landing was unusually quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the uneasy, stretched thin kind, like the city was holding its breath. Whispers moved faster than ravens. The Queen had been arrested. The Starks had returned. Poison had touched the king's lips, but not his heart. Inside the Red Keep, King Robert sat in his solar, a fresh goblet of wine untouched beside him, a rare sight. His face was hard, not with anger, but with the weight of a man forced to wake up after years of drunken slumber. Across from him stood Robb and Jon. Varys lingered near the window, quiet as ever. "I should have seen it," Robert muttered. "How many years did I spend beside that woman, and I never noticed she wanted me dead." Jon stayed quiet, but Robb stepped forward. "You trusted her because you were tired, not blind. She's clever, and she used your weaknesses. But now you see her for what she is, and what her children are." Robert's gaze sharpened. "The girl Arya, she claims Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen aren't mine." "Not claims," Robb said. "She saw something more than once. Jaime Lannister and Cersei. They're not just siblings, they're lovers. That would make the children illegitimate. All of them." For a moment, Robert looked like he'd been struck in the chest. He blinked, his face crumbling in slow, painful recognition. "Gods," Ned tried to tell me. "He knew, didn't he?" Jon spoke softly. "He did, and he died for it." Robert slammed his fist on the table. "Then I was a fool. I trusted the lions and fed my wolves to them. I let Cersei tear your father down. I let her corrupt my kingdom while I drank myself into blindness." Silence. Then Varys cleared his throat. "Your Grace, the city watches your every move now. If you go after the Queen and her children, the Lannisters will not stay silent. Tywin still commands half the gold in Westeros and 10,000 swords." Robert looked at him coldly. "I'm the king." Varys gave a polite nod. "Indeed, but kings bleed too." Robb stepped closer. "Let us help you. My father died for the truth. Don't let his death be wasted. Let us make things right, together." Robert looked up, his old fire slowly returning. "You want to help me, boy? Then stay. Be my hand. Stand where your father once stood. Help me put this kingdom back together before it tears itself apart." Robb blinked, caught off guard. "You want me?" "You're Ned's blood," Robert said, "and you're not afraid to act. You proved that last night. That's more than I can say for most men in this castle." Robb looked at Jon, who gave a small nod. Jon had always been the shadow, the quiet one, but in that moment Robb saw him as more than his brother. He saw him as an equal, as someone who could stand beside him in something far greater than war. "If I serve," Robb said carefully, "I do it not for power, but to fix what's broken, starting with your line of succession." Robert's eyes narrowed. "You want Joffrey gone?" "I want the truth to rule," Robb said. "Not a lie." Before Robert could answer, the doors burst open. Sir Barristan Selmy entered, face grave. "Your Grace, Lord Renley has arrived. He demands to see you, and he's not alone." Renley? Robert asked. Why in the hells? He brought men, 200 of the Stormland's finest. They say he came to protect his brother, or to replace him. Jon's eyes darkened. It's starting. Robb turned to the king. You need to move fast. The Lannisters will not sit idle, and now your own blood is knocking with soldiers at your gate. Robert stood slowly. He looked like a man walking out of a grave, reborn not with joy but with fury. Then I'll remind them all who wears the crown. Outside the Red Keep, Renley Baratheon rode through the city gates with a smile too polished to be honest. Behind him rode knights in green and gold, their banners snapping in the breeze. The vultures were circling. And in the tower cell deep below, Cersei Lannister watched the morning light fade behind her bars, knowing her time was running out, but not her influence. She still had pawns. She still had plans. And war was no longer a threat. It was a promise. The throne room of the Red Keep echoed with clashing voices. The High Lords of the realm had been summoned by King Robert for an emergency council, but instead of unity, the hall filled with arguments and sharp accusations. Renley Baratheon stood tall beside his bannerman, his green cloak gleaming like envy itself. He wore a confident smirk, but beneath it there was something else: ambition. It wasn't hard to see that Renley hadn't come to support his brother. He had come to test the waters, to see if he could wear the crown instead. My brother is wounded by betrayal, Renley announced to the lords. The Queen plots against his life, and her children are illegitimate. If that is true, then the realm must be prepared to crown a true Baratheon heir. Robert scowled. I'm not dead yet, Renley, and I'll be damned if you try to sit the throne while I still draw breath. Then act like a king, Renley fired back. Act before Tywin Lannister burns this city down. The room fell into hushed whispers. Meanwhile, Jon and Robb remained outside the hall, standing on a quiet balcony overlooking the city. Jon leaned on the stone railing, eyes narrowed on the streets below. The city looked calm, but even from here you could feel the unrest growing like a sickness. They're already picking Robert's replacement, Jon said bitterly. And he's still breathing. Robb shook his head. That's how it always goes. The throne makes men greedy, and no one in that hall is loyal to the truth, just their own power. Jon was quiet for a moment, then turned toward his brother. We need to talk about what happens next. Robb raised an eyebrow. Next? Jon's tone dropped. You know the Lannisters won't let this go. Tywin won't let his grandchildren be declared bastards without bloodshed. And Jaime, he won't just sit and watch his sister rot in a cell. War is coming, Robb. Robb nodded slowly. I know. That's why I need you. Jon frowned. Me? You're not just my brother, Jon. You're the only one I trust in this viper's nest. Robert offered me the hand's position. I didn't say yes yet. Jon blinked. Why not? Because I don't know if I can do it alone. Robb's voice was raw, honest. This isn't the North. Down here, men smile while they plot your murder. If I stay and serve the king, I need someone who can protect our family's interest and keep his sword sharp. Jon looked at him, a strange emotion flickering behind his eyes. And what if they don't want me here? I'm still just a bastard. Not to me, Robb said. Not anymore. You've done more for the king in a day than most lords have in years. I want you by my side as my sworn brother, not in the shadows, not behind me, beside me. Jon looked away for a moment, his jaw clenched, then finally nodded. All right, I'll stay. Before they could say more, a breathless soldier ran up. My lords, the Queen, she's escaped. Robb's head snapped toward him. What? The soldier nodded, pale. She's gone. The guards are dead, throats slit. We found a trail leading through the black cells. Looks like someone helped her escape through the tunnels. Jon's heart dropped. Varys' tunnels. Robb grabbed the soldier. Who helped her? Did anyone see anything? Only a flash of red. A woman in red robes was spotted near the dungeons hours before. Robb let go, his face twisted in fury. She's planning something. Jon stepped forward. No. She's already done something. That night, a raven flew from King's Landing toward Casterly Rock, another toward Harrenhal, another toward the twins. Cersei was in the wind, and the realm was about to bleed for it. And in a hidden chamber beneath the Red Keep, a cloaked man met with a shadowed figure. You released her, he said. The other figure, a woman with burning red eyes, smiled. The Queen has a role yet to play in the war to come. Let the false king keep his throne for now. The real fire has yet to rise. Above them, lightning cracked the sky, and the first storm of war rolled in over the city. The storm broke fully by morning. Rain poured over the Red Keep, and the skies turned grey as ash. King's Landing awoke to confusion, fear, and rumours spilling through the alleys faster than the water ran in the gutters. The Queen had escaped, and the scent of war was thick in the air. In the throne room, King Robert stood like a statue, his crown heavy on his head. He had not slept. His eyes were sunken, his voice hoarse, but his anger burned hotter than any forge in the city. She was in my dungeons, he growled to Sir Barristan, to Renley, to Robb, Jon, and the small council gathered. In my cells, and someone let her walk free. That is treason. Varys stepped forward, as calm as ever. Or perhaps a sign that treason already surrounds us. The Queen would not have escaped without help from within. The real question is, who still serves her? Renley, standing with arms crossed, muttered, You should be asking, where is she going? Robb answered without hesitation, Casterly Rock. She'll return to her father. Tywin will raise his banners. Robert looked at him, jaw tight. Then we ride first. No, Jon said suddenly. All heads turned to him, surprised. Robert narrowed his eyes. No? If you ride out now, you abandon the throne. That's what she wants, Jon said, his voice low but steady. If you chase her, the realm thinks the Lannisters are stronger, that you fear her. You must hold King's Landing. You must show strength here, now. Robb nodded. Jon's right. Let her father come. Let him bring his armies. He'll find the gates locked, the city prepared, and the king sober and standing. For a moment, Robert said nothing. Then he gave a crooked smile. Ned would have said the same damn thing. He looked at them both. You boys, you're wasted on the north. That same day, Robert declared Robb Stark as his new Hand of the King, officially replacing the dead and dishonoured council. The court watched with wide eyes, whispers filling every corner of the Red Keep. A young northern wolf advising the Lion King? It was a scandal waiting to boil over. Jon was named Lord Commander of the City Watch, a title that shocked many, but none dared question. The gold cloaks followed strength, and in Jon they saw a quiet shadow with a sword that had already drawn blood for the king. Ghost walked beside him like a silent omen, but their rise did not go unchallenged. That evening, Renley met Robb in private chambers, his tone cold. You think Robert will stay loyal to you when the fires burn hotter? You think you can rule this place with northern pride and good intentions? Robb stood calm, unshaken. I think someone has to. Renley smirked. Then watch your back, Stark. You've made enemies without even knowing their names. Far away, beyond the city walls, Cersei Lannister rode through muddy paths under the cover of night. Her cloak was soaked through, her hair tangled, but her fury kept her warm. Beside her rode Ser Meryn Trant, bloody from the escape. And behind them, in a covered cart, sat her 3 children, Joffrey staring into nothing, Myrcella shivering in silence, and Tommen asking where they were going. We're going home, Cersei said through clenched teeth. To my father. To vengeance. She looked behind her, as if sensing eyes in the dark. And she was right. Riding far to the west, Jaime Lannister had left King's Landing quietly the moment he heard of his sister's capture. He was not headed to Casterly Rock. No, Jaime was riding to gather men. Not soldiers for a noble cause, mercenaries, cutthroats, the kind who didn't care about banners, only gold. The Queen's escape wasn't an end. It was the fuse. Back in the city, Jon walked the walls of the Red Keep as the storm began to settle. He looked out toward the sea, toward the far-off horizon where enemies were gathering like thunderclouds. Robb joined him, armor wet, hair clinging to his face. We bought time, Jon said. Robb nodded. But the storm hasn't passed. Jon turned to him. Then let it come. This time we're ready. And below them, the bells of the city tolled again, not for a death, not for a king, but for a reckoning that would soon divide the realm. The rains had passed, but the air in King's Landing still tasted like smoke and steel. Days had turned into a blur of war councils, scribbled letters, and messengers flying in and out of the Red Keep like crows over a battlefield. And though the sun now shone over the capital, the shadow of House Lannister grew darker with every hour. Robb sat in the small council chamber, staring down at a map of the realm. His fingers tapped the table, not from nerves but strategy. Red flags now marked Harrenhal, Casterly Rock, and the Golden Tooth. All three strongholds were mobilizing. Lannister banners had been raised, and ravens confirmed it. Tywin Lannister had declared Robert's rule illegitimate. To the realm, it was treason. To Tywin, it was revenge. Jon entered the chamber, Ghost silently trailing behind him. 2 riders came in from the Riverlands, Jon said, removing his gloves. Lannister troops sacked a Tully village near River Run. No survivors. They sent a message. Robb's jaw tightened. They want us to act first. They want Robert to be dragged into a full war. And he will be, Jon added, unless we stop it first. Robb looked up sharply. You're thinking what I'm thinking? Jon nodded. We strike first, not with an army, with silence. They leaned in over the map, not as lord and bastard, not as hand and commander, but as brothers. We send men into Lannisport under cover of night, Robb said. Sabotage the ships, burn the stores, cut their supply lines before they even move toward the capital. Jon added, and if we hit the Golden Tooth fast and clean, we might stop their army from passing through the Westerlands at all. They both knew it was risky. A direct attack without the king's full army could be seen as overreach. But waiting meant letting the lion sharpen his claws. Robb rose. I'll speak to Robert tonight. That night, King Robert was alone in the gardens, a goblet of wine in his hand, though for once it was untouched. The moonlight spilled over his shoulders, giving him a regal glow he hadn't worn in years. Robb approached quietly. Your Grace. Robert turned, eyes bleary but not drunk. The realm wants blood, boy. I know, Robb replied. They want me to be the king I used to be. Swing my hammer, crush my enemies, silence the chaos. But I'm older now. Slower. I lost half my soul when Lyanna died, and the rest when Ned did. Robb stood silent. Then Robert looked at him directly. But you remind me of him. You stand like him, think like him. Gods help me. You might be better than him in some ways. Robb lowered his eyes. I'm only trying to finish what he started. To protect the truth he died for. Robert breathed deeply. Then tell me, Robb Stark, Hand of the King, what would your father have me do now? Robb didn't hesitate. Strike first, quietly. Show Tywin that the North and the Crown are not weak. He wants to divide us, but if he sees unity, he'll hesitate. Robert nodded. Do it. Take the men you need. Choose them wisely. This isn't war yet, but the next move could make it one. The following night, a dozen black-cloaked riders slipped out of King's Landing under the cover of darkness. No banners, no sigils, just blades, cloaks, and silence. Jon led the party himself, an unusual move, but one he insisted on. He left Robb with only 2 words: "Trust me." Robb watched them disappear into the dark, knowing full well what it meant. Jon wasn't just a brother anymore. He was a shadow in service of the light, and if he succeeded, the war might be delayed. If he failed, the war would come faster than anyone could stop it. Far across the realm, at Casterly Rock, Cersei stood before her father. Her face was calm, but her eyes were fire. "They dared imprison me," she said. "They humiliated my children. The crown is poisoned by northern blood." Tywin Lannister said nothing for a long moment. Then finally, "You should have killed Robert outright." "He was protected," Cersei spat, "by Ned Stark's sons." Tywin's jaw clenched. "Then we kill them both." He turned to his maester. "Summon the armies and send a raven to the eyrie." "The Vale?" Cersei asked. Tywin looked at her with a faint, cruel smile. "Yes. Let us see where Littlefinger's loyalties truly lie." As the wind howled over the high walls of the rock, war drums echoed faintly in the distance. The wolves had bitten first. Now the lions would roar. The sun rose blood-orange over King's Landing, casting long shadows across the city as if the gods themselves were holding their breath. Robb stood at the top of the Red Keep, staring out over the capital one last time before the storm broke. His raven-black cloak flapped in the morning wind, the direwolf sigil of House Stark stitched proudly across the back. Today, he wasn't just Ned Stark's son, he was the hand of the king, and the realm was holding together by the grip of his fingers. Behind him, the doors opened. Jon entered silently, tired but alive, his armor dusted with dried mud and blood. Ghost was at his side, his white fur stained red. "You did it," Robb said without turning. "I wasn't sure you'd make it back." Jon stepped beside him, eyes heavy. "We hit Lannisport before dawn, burned 6 ships, slaughtered a dozen guards. No survivors. They'll know it was us eventually, but not yet." Robb let out a breath. "That buys us time. Maybe weeks." "Not months," Jon said. "Tywin's moving. He's already summoned bannermen from the Westerlands and the Reach. Gold moves fast." Robb nodded grimly. "Then so must we." Down in the city, the people were uneasy. The Queen's escape had shaken the court, but it was the silence afterward that truly terrified them. Lords watched each other with suspicion. Whispers curled through brothels and taverns like smoke, and even the city watch were growing restless. But in the Red Keep, a final council had gathered. King Robert sat at the head of the table, older than ever, the crown feeling heavier than steel on his brow. Beside him, Robb stood, cloaked in black. Jon stood opposite, his hand resting on his sword hilt. Sir Barristan, Varys, and Renley filled the room with tension. Robert looked around. "The Lannisters will march. That much is certain." "And you want to stop them with words?" Renley scoffed. "They spit on your rule. They call your children bastards. Tywin calls you a drunk with no heirs." Robert turned his eyes on him, hard. "Then let him come and say it to my face." But Robb interrupted. "We must act before he reaches the Crown Lands. I propose we strike him on 2 fronts, cut him off before he crosses the Blackwater, and burn his supplies from the Reach before they reach his camps." "And who leads this strike?" Renly asked sharply. Robb didn't hesitate. "Jon Snow." Renly narrowed his eyes. "A bastard commands the Crown's forces?" "He's more loyal than most lords I've met in this city," Robert growled. "And he's proven himself. Let the boy lead." Renley said nothing, but the look in his eyes said more than enough: jealousy, fear, and something darker. The council ended, but the storm did not. That night, as the city prepared for war, a feast was held, what many would call the last peaceful night in King's Landing. Roasted boar, spiced wine, and music echoed through the great hall, but the cheer was hollow. Robb sat beside the king, speaking little, watching everything. Jon stood near the back, arms crossed, Ghost sitting at his feet like a silent sentinel. Lords danced, courtiers laughed. But something wasn't right. Jon felt it in his bones. And then, a scream. The doors slammed open, and a bloody guard stumbled in. Attack. He fell dead before finishing the word. From the shadows, cloaked men in gold and red burst into the hall. Lannister spies, hidden among the city for weeks, now unleashed. The hall exploded into chaos. Jon drew his sword and dove into the fray, cutting down 2 attackers in seconds. Ghost tore through a third. Robb flipped the table, shielding the king as arrows flew. Renley disappeared, coward or conspirator. No one knew. Robert struggled to rise, but Robb grabbed him. "Stay down, your grace." Jon's blade met another just inches from Robb's head. The 2 brothers stood back to back, fighting as one, their swords flashing like twin wolves under the moon. By the end, the ground was soaked in blood. The attackers were dead. So were 5 lords. Robert had taken a wound in his shoulder, but lived. When the hall fell silent, only the breathing of survivors remained. Robb turned to Jon. "This was planned." Jon nodded. "Renly's gone. We need to find him." But even as they spoke, ravens were already in the air, one from Dragonstone, one from Riverrun, and one from across the sea, carrying a message to a girl with silver hair and fire in her blood. Westeros was no longer at the edge. It was falling into the fire. And 2 northern brothers, once boys in Winterfell, now stood as the last defense between the crown and the flames.